the title of my presentation this afternoon is Paving the Way for Youth Participation in Politics. So this is basically part of my ongoing research on the involvement of youth in politics. So as mentioned by Christy just now, if you have any question, anything that you want to raise, you can do so in the chat box. So I try to make this presentation as short as possible so that there will be more interaction, there will be more discussion, more issues to be raised later at the end of this presentation. So basically, this is how I am going to structure my my talk this afternoon. I'm going to give a little bit of give an overview of Malaysian politics, recent trends in Malaysian politics. Then I'm going to focus on youth and Malaysian politics. In particular, I'm going to discuss why politics is important and why it is also important for the youth of Malaysia to be serious about politics and to participate in the country's political process more actively. Why the youth is important, why it is time for the youth to participate more actively in politics. So I'm going to give you some reasons why this is the opportune time for the youth to make themselves heard and to make themselves counted in the country's development. Next, I'm going to talk about the challenges for the youth and government, strategies for the youth and the government. What can the youth do? And since this is an initiative organized by an NGO based in Sarawak, and most of the participants are from Sarawak, so I'm going to talk a little bit about MS63 because we all know that MS63 is a very it's a big issue here in Sarawak and also in Sabah. So it is important for the youth in particular to have a different perspective about MS63 and to look at Sarawak's autonomy differently, because you are going to be the future leaders of the country. So you must be able to come up with something different in terms of how we can address MS63 and how we can fight for Sarawak's autonomy, probably more strategically and more effectively. Then the last one will be the conclusion. Now, just to share with you a little bit about the recent trend in Malaysian politics. We all know that basically in Malaysia at the moment, there is no dominant party anymore. Malaysian politics is no longer dominated by UMNO or by Barisan Nasional. They used to dominate Malaysian politics. So in every election, they managed to win with a 2/3 majority. So because the government is so powerful, BN and UMNO were so powerful then they will be able to change the constitution. They will be able to exert political pressure, and some politicians were also able to manipulate the country's constitution, the country's law in order to serve their own political interests. This happened starting in 2008, and basically we all know also that in 2008 and 2013, Sabah and Sarawak rose to become what was known then as fixed deficit states, because without the role of Sabah and Sarawak, Barisan Nasional would not have been able to retain power, especially at the federal level. The good thing about this is that at that time, MS63 became very, very mainstream. A lot of people, not only in Sabah and Sarawak, but also in Peninsular Malaysia, they became aware about MS63 because a lot of the MPs from Sabah and Sarawak, they started to talk about MS63. A lot of my friends, for instance, in Peninsular Malaysia, they became aware about what's happening in Sabah and Sarawak. So the good thing about the rise of Sabah and Sarawak is that more and more people became aware, more and more people became, they know what's going on in Sabah and Sarawak and why MS63 is a very important issue for Sabah and Sarawak. But then again, we all know this, 2018, that was a very historic day for Malaysia because Pakatan Harapan managed to form the government, but the government did not last long, because in 2020 it fell from power, and then we also see the formation of Pakatan Nasional, and now it seems like Malaysian politics is going back to the status quo. Some people say that we are going back to the status quo, we are going back to the era during which the BN was in power. But for me, I don't think it necessarily means that we are going back to the status quo. Yes, the same old leaders from Barisan Nasional, from UMNO, they are in power now, but the approaches to our politics is not necessarily the same. It's not necessarily the status quo, because even though the same leaders are managing the country now, then again, they have to listen to the political pressure on the ground. They have to listen to the voices of the youth. They have to listen to the different opinions or different ideas from various groups and political leaders. And as I mentioned to you all earlier, there is no dominant party now in Malaysia. So if you want to form a government, you have to work together with the other parties or the other groups. Okay, so they will be very interesting. 20 and 21 and beyond. What is going to happen to our politics? So we have been discussing a lot about the politics of coalition building. So most probably we will be seeing friends and enemies from different parties coming together to form the government. So this is possible, like what we see in many of the European countries, like in Germany, like in Spain, like in Italy, where different political parties, they come together in order to form the government. As I mentioned to you earlier, it is not it is possible for a party like UMNO to cooperate with DAP, for instance, or DAP to cooperate with PAS and things like that, because they want to form the government. So the political trajectories that you're going to see will be one that is shaped by what I call as the politics of coalition building. So this is what is going to happen in 2021 and beyond. Okay, so that is just a little bit about recent development in Malaysian politics. Why I think this is important? Because this is giving the context in terms of the rise of the youth in Malaysian politics. And it's also very important for the youth to understand what's going on. And then by understanding our political development, then you will be able to know basically in which area you can contribute more. Okay. So let's go on to the next one, youth in Malaysian politics, why politics matters. I've been teaching politics for many years now in public universities. So the first question that I ask to my students every time I start my lecture is, what do they think of politics? What is their perception of politics? So of course, 90 or 80% of the views of the youth is that politics is a bad thing. And there is a lot of anxieties about politics. When they think of politics, they always relate it to greed, human greed. They say politics is nothing, it is about money. Politics is about the manipulation of power. Politics is about self-serving, power-hungry individuals. So this is what is the main perception of the youth when it comes to politics. So I have a hard time in class convincing my students that politics is not necessarily all of this. Yes, these are part and parcel of the political game. Politics is about governing the country. Politics is about making decision, and politics is about policy making. So this is what I've been doing for the past 10 to 15 years, convincing the young people that politics is not at all, it's not just about greed, money, manipulation of power, and so on and so forth. Politics is a very exciting subject. Everything revolves around politics. Even while we are attending this lecture, our member of parliaments talking about issues affecting the country, that is politics. Okay? So This is one of the reasons why many young people shun politics. They do not want to learn more about politics, and many basically when they come to my class, they talk about politics. They have a negative perception about it. So, as I mentioned to you earlier, it is my role, my responsibility to convince the youth, my students, that politics is important and everybody should take the responsibility to contribute to our political process. Now, when you look at this study by Merdeka Center, so they asked the respondents, how strongly do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Public officials, politicians don't care what people like you think. And if you look at the results of the survey, at the 68% of the respondents from the age of 18 and 22 agree with this statement, followed by those from the age of 28 and 30, and those from the age of 23 to 27. Okay, so it's clear that politicians give politics a bad name. Politics is not necessarily bad, but politicians give politics a bad name, if we can infer from these results from Merdeka Center. So it's the same with the statement. If you all remember, I think about 2 or 3 months ago, there's this journalist, I remember, I think he's from the US. So he said, Malaysia is heading, Malaysia is a failed state. But of course, some people agree with the statement, some people do not agree. But for me, Malaysia is not a failed state yet, because if you study political science, failed state means a state that cannot even serve the basic needs of the people. Despite the weaknesses that we are having, that we are seeing every day in the country, but the government is still able to serve the basic needs of the people, to run the government, to run the economy. So we are not yet a failed state. Perhaps it's the politicians that fail us. Okay? So another survey done by Merdeka Center, they asked the respondents, how strongly do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Politics and government seem so complicated that I can't really understand what's going on. Again, if you look at the results, 79% of the respondents from the age of 18 and 22 agree with this statement. Okay, they feel like politics is so complicated. They feel like there is no need for them to participate because they do not understand what is going on. Okay, so this sort of perception that is developing among the youth makes a lot of youth to shun politics, and makes a lot of youth to not want to contribute more actively and more meaningfully in the country's political process. Yeah. So, yeah, I see Choi Meng Hoi raise a hand there. Do you have any question? Christy, are we going to allow the participant to ask question now, or later after the end of the presentation?
We will ask question after the lecture.
Okay. Okay, so Ming Hoi, perhaps you can ask question later. I'm sure you have a lot of questions to ask. Okay, so now, why the youth? If you also remember, this is a very popular quote from Soekarno, the Indonesian nationalist. So he says in bahasa Indonesia, beri aku 1000 orang tua, niscaya akan kucabut semeru dari akarnya. Beri aku 10 pemuda, niscaya akan kuguncangkan dunia. So what does it mean? Well, basically, this is what he says. Just give me 1,000 old people, then with that 1,000 people, I can take the Gunung Semeru from the roots. But at the same time, he says, give me just 10 young people. These 10 young people can help me to shake the world. So why he says this? Because he believes in the ability, in the capability of the young people to make a difference, not only in Indonesia, but throughout the world. Because according to Soekarno, young people are the future leaders of the country, so they have a lot of responsibility, and the country's fate basically rests in the hands of the young people. Okay, so young people matters. Now, just look at some numbers here. At the end of 2017, 40% of registered voters were those between 21 and 39 years old. In 2008, the same age group numbered about 6.1 million compared to 3 million from those who were more than 60 years old. Okay. Now, 7.8 million youth between the ages of 18 and 21 will be eligible to vote for the coming GE15 in 2023. So if you look at these numbers, it's clear that young people have the population strength to make a difference. So the only issue here is that we have a lot of young people in this country, but the only issue here is that whether or not the young people register themselves as voters and whether or not they are going to vote in the coming election. A critical issue that we can discuss later. And we all know that the role of the young people was very, very instrumental, was very pertinent in causing or in contributing to the fall of Barisan Nasional, especially in 2018. When you look at this data compiled by Bridget Wells, a very well-known political scientist studying Malaysian politics, it's clear if you look at the 2013 BN share of the votes from the youth, you see a substantial reduction, okay, from the 2013 and 2018 share of the youth vote given to Barisan Nasional. Okay, it's very substantial. You look at the reductions, 17.10% and 15%, especially from the age group of 21 to 30 and 31 to 40. Okay. Now, what were the reasons for the young people to abandon the Barisan Nasional and to support Pakatan Harapan? So there were many reasons given by this particular scholar. So she said, number one is the economic vulnerability of the youth, which the BN did not manage to address effectively. Number two, the lack of engagement by Barisan Nasional, especially in urban areas. We all know that Pakatan Harapan was quite successful in using the social media to engage with the youth, to convince the youth to support Pakatan Harapan, but BN was a bit slow in that matter. They didn't manage to capture the sentiment of the youth, especially in the urban areas. Also, more young candidates contesting under Pakatan Harapan, the previous election. More younger voters registered by Pakatan Harapan. I remember DAP came up with a very, very effective voter registration drive. They managed to register a lot of young voters in Peninsular Malaysia. And I can also see that that's also happening in the parts of Malaysia. In Sabah, for instance, they did a very aggressive voter registration drive before the previous election. Engagement by PH with youth on social media, as I mentioned to you earlier, compared to Barisan Nasional, Pakatan Harapan was quite successful in enticing the youth, in convincing the youth to support the coalition via the social media. Okay, so these are among the reasons stated by Bridget Wells, reasons that cause the youth to abandon BN and to support the Pakatan Harapan. Now, again, why the youth, especially the case for lowering the voting age? This is a big issue nowadays. It was decided by the government then to lower the voting age from 21 to 18. Well, of course, some supported the move, some did not support by saying that the youth are still immature and things like that. But nevertheless, a law was passed on this, even though a law was passed in Parliament, but then the government decided to delay the implementation of this policy. But then if we still remember, the federal court, sorry, the High Court of the High Court in Kuching decided make a ruling to tell the government to implement this policy as soon as possible by the end of this year, if I'm not mistaken. So if this is happening this year, is going to be a game changer, especially in Malaysian politics. Now, why this is important? Because when you look at our parliament, certainly there is a huge gap between the oldest member of parliament and the youngest. So we have Tun Mahathir. Tun Mahathir now, if I'm not mistaken, he is 96. Syed Saddiq is 28. Well, Prabhakaran, the MP for can't remember for which area, he is 22. So there is this huge gap between the oldest and the youngest member of parliament. So this begs the question, why this huge gap and why there are so not so many young people in our parliament. Now, in terms of age group, in terms of the distribution of MPs in the last previous election, when you look at the age group, certainly MPs from the age of 50 to 59, there are more of them there in parliament, followed by those from the age of 60 to 69. And if you look at the MPs from the age of 20 to 29, 30 to 39, they're not that many. I think only like they represent only 12% of the MPs in our parliament. Okay, so now age composition of PH MPs, certainly there are more young MPs from Pakatan Harapan. If you look at the graph shown on the screen, you can see the differences between PH and PN MPs in terms of age. Okay, and this is again the distribution of age of the 14 Dewan Rakyat. As I mentioned to you earlier, only 12% MPs are from the age of 20 to 39. Okay, so showing us that this is vital, it's very important that we prepare the young people to participate in politics so that we can cross this age gap between the oldest and the youngest member of parliament. Now, what is the trend around the world? If you look at the trend around the world, it's also very interesting. The minimum age for member of parliament across the world, I think, is between 17 to 18. If you look at the US, for instance, Australia, some countries in Africa even, they have decided to put the minimum age for MP at 18 years old. Okay, and in terms of the minimum age for voting, you look at the trend. It's not just Malaysia; it's everywhere across the world. I think more than 80 or 90% of the of countries all over the world, they decided to put the minimum voting age at 18. Okay, there are very few countries who have yet to lower the voting age, but on average across the world, 18 seems to be the preferred age preferred minimum age for voting. So why this is the right time for us to lower the voting age in Malaysia? Because 18 years old are more mature and they are more sophisticated now. Sophisticated in terms of their awareness, in terms of their exposure politics, especially through social media. Okay? It's also very important for us to promote civic responsibility at an early age. If not 18, then when? Because if we put it at 18, then the young people especially, they know that we are giving them this responsibility to participate more actively in politics. So I think it's very important that we promote civic responsibility, to expose politics to them at an early age. Also, 18-year-olds already have rights comparable in importance to voting, especially to get a driving license, to enroll in the military or in the police force, to get married, to enter into a legal contract, and so on and so forth. So if you refer to the Age of Majority Act 1971, so 18 years old is considered as the legal age for adult in Malaysia. So if we are giving them the opportunity to get a driving license, to enroll into the military, to get married, then why can't we give them the responsibility to be a voter at such a young age? Okay? To ensure that the electorate is more representative, if we allow the young people to participate as a voter, then our electorate will be more representative, okay, of the composition of Malaysia's population. And last but not least, the right to vote is a fundamental political right. It reflects the principle of a government of the people and not just for the people. So this is similar to the earlier point. This is a government of the people. So if we say this is a government of the people, it has to reflect the composition. It has to reflect the diversity of Malaysia's population. Of course, there are many challenges for this implementation of this voting age, and also challenges in terms of trying to get more youth to participate more actively in politics. To close the generational gap is not easy, especially in convincing the older generation of the youth capability to lead. Some are quite reserved, some have reservation about the youth capability to lead the country, and their capability to take issues more seriously, especially issues of concern like economic issues, foreign affairs, and things like that. Readiness of political parties and party leaders. Some political parties, they are quite adamant. They are not ready to implement policy that empower the youth to take charge in the country's politics. Some party leaders seems to also refuse to let the young blood to take over the party. So I think this is very much dependent upon the readiness of political parties and party leaders. Getting the youth to participate more actively is also a challenge. Of course, getting them to participate is one thing, but to ensure that their participation is of quality, that is another challenge. Participating is one thing, but to participate meaningfully and effectively is another thing. So that is why I think in this respect, education is very, very important, which I'm going to talk more later in my later presentation. Automatic registration, of course, there will be a lot of challenge. Some people say that unless we ensure that our electoral roll is clean, is updated, then we cannot register the new voters automatically. So it has to be, we have to make sure that the electoral roll is updated, it's clean before this process takes place. And when it comes to this process in Sabah, for instance, Sabahans are quite concerned because some of those listed in our electoral roll are those people who are no longer alive. We have also been there's also a lot of problems in terms of phantom voters in Sabah. So this has to be addressed before the automatic registration is implemented. Best strategies for the youth and government. Of course, it's very important for political education to be enhanced, especially at the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels. Awareness campaign by the Election Commission and other concerned organizations to encourage the youth to participate. Establishment of a political school. I think everybody can come up with a political school. So if such a political school is to be established, it has to focus on political leadership, power, authority, and legitimacy, and the rule of law. So I've seen there's some NGOs in the country who have been able to set up such a school. But it is hope that more NGOs, more civil society organizations will take the challenge to establish more political school and to enlist more youth to participate in the political school, and to establish non-partisan political clubs at the university. So when I say non-partisan, I mean everybody can come to this club talking about ideology, talking about political issues. We can even invite different political leaders from different political parties to be part of this club, to talk about the political process in the country, and also to talk about important political issues which we should focus on and which we should solve together. Okay. So what can the youth do? I like this quote from Plato. Christy, do I have to? Are we still? Do I have time?
Yes, yes,
Okay, I can proceed.
yes.
Okay. So I like this quote from Plato. So he says, one of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. So this is a very strong message, especially for the youth. If you want to see changes to happen in the country, then it's important that you participate in the process and be part of the changes. So what can you do? At least register yourself as a voter. That's number one. Okay. Number two, make yourself heard and be counted. Number three, write to your member of parliaments. Okay. And criticize constructively and be part of the solution. So I think it is more productive rather than venting your anger on the social media, criticizing your member of parliament on Facebook. I think it's more constructive if you can suggest solutions to your MPs about problems in a particular area. Okay. Okay. Going to the next one, the youth, MS63, and the fight for Sarawak's autonomy. I know for sure that MS63 is a very important issue in Sabah and Sarawak, and we always talk about autonomy. We always talk about trying to restore the rights for Sabah and Sarawak. But I think it's very important for the youth to change the narratives. It is important to talk about MS63, but it is more important for the narratives of MS63 be changed. So how do we change the narrative? Number one, from historical grievances to economic opportunities. So we cannot be talking about historical grievances always, but we have to also focus on economic opportunities. When you look at Sarawak, Sarawak is very rich in natural resources. We have oil and gas here. Our tourism industry is one of the best in the world. We have a lot more natural resources. The population is very, very culturally diverse. So these are our strengths. So strengths which we can tap into and which we can turn into economic opportunities. So we should stop talking about what our past leaders did to Sarawak, about their mistake and things like that, but we should be focusing more on opportunities focusing more on our strength and how we can use those strengths to develop the state. From blame game to constructive collaboration and positive relationship. Of course, I've been following this discussion on MX63, so the blame game is still there. Some in Sarawak blame Malaya for the erosion of Sarawak rights, for instance. The same thing happened also. The same thing also happens in Sabah. People keep on blaming the federal government, federal leaders for what is happening to Sabah and Sarawak. But then again, this has to stop, and we have to work together with the federal government in order to develop the state. If you can suggest solutions on how we can get back our rights, I think we can promote more engagement, more meaningful dialogues and collaboration, rather than blaming the leaders in Malaysia for what is happening to Sabah and Sarawak. The evolution of power and decentralization. This is a very important process because if we want our rights back, then part of the process is through the devolution of power and decentralization, which means giving back the power of the state, and also trying to making the federal government more responsible, especially in devolving power and in decentralizing responsibility to Sabah and Sarawak, which I think what the present Sarawak government is doing, and which I think what the Sabah government is trying to do. It is also very important to focus on the real needs of the youth, training, employment. It's very important that we address this. Not only Sabah and Sarawak are considered as among the poorest state in Malaysia, but the employment rate is also quite high. So I think this is something that the youth needs to look at, and perhaps you can look for different cases around the world, and perhaps you can suggest to the government on how to create more opportunities for employment. Empowerment of the youth is very important as well, which is similar to training. Okay, so the point that I want to make here is this: MSc3 is important, autonomy is important, but the question that the youth need to ask themselves is this: how can we fight for MSc3? How can we fight for autonomy so that our well-being will be protected, our economic opportunities will be provided, and how can this MSc3 autonomy can be addressed so that we can develop the state's economy for Sabah and also for Sarawak. So, in conclusion, this is an opportune time for the youth to participate more actively. As what you can see in the video just now, by participating, it doesn't mean that you have to stand as a candidate. Even though I personally would like to see more youth to contest in the election, not just by talking about politics, not just by discussing about politics. So I think it's also very important for the youth to take the challenge, to go into the political ring and to contest as a candidate. So you can contest as a candidate, hold a public office. You can attend a strategy meeting. It's up to you which political parties you want to support. This is a free and democratic country. But the most important thing is you are there to give your idea, give your opinion about how to win in the election, for instance. You may also want to become a member of a political party, attend a political rally, even though political rally is not really a culture here yet, but I'm sure as the country develops, there will be more and more political rallies in which people going to demonstrate, express their opinions and their views about issues that matter to them. Contributing to a political party financially or in kind, contacting a public official and political leader, or even initiating a political discussion. So there are many ways and means for the youth to use, basically. But as I mentioned to you earlier, I would like to see more and more youth to become a member, attend a strategy meeting, contest as a candidate, and hold a public office. The country needs new breeds of leaders. Why? Because for too long, Malaysian politics is dominated by the same political elites. But then again, as I mentioned to you earlier at the beginning, the end of BN's dominance and the political realignment in 2018, 2020 provided the opportunities for new leaders to rise to the occasion. So I think this is the right time for the youth to participate more actively in politics. But then again, by saying so, doesn't mean that we have to alienate the older generation. So we need the older generation for their wisdom, for their experience. So it is important that we combine the youth idealism, the youth energy and enthusiasm with the perseverance and temperance of the older generation. So I know the youth are very excited, they're very enthusiastic, and they're very idealistic. But then again, this has to be tempered by the perseverance and by the wisdom which the older generation can provide. So with that, I end my presentation. So if you have any question, you want to discuss more about the issue, you can email me. I can also be found on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and you can also read my my blog, even though I haven't updated it for a very long time. But still, some of my writings are downloaded there. You can read those articles, those writings. So if you have any question, you can email me anytime. So that's all from me, Christy. Thank you.